stuff that was really great, no Crowley, nothing.
It's creating this huge vacuum.
But I think in a lot of ways this is deliberate. I mean, I can't help but think, maybe even on an unconscious level, they've just decided that they don't like Crowley that much, and they don't really want these books out there that they're going to be held accountable, that people will read the Crowley material and say, wait a minute, you're not doing that, you're not doing this. You know, we heard an account, recently we saw an account of the Solar Lodge, where once the Solar Lodge members started reading the Crowley material for the first time, they started arguing with their leadership, saying, you're doing stuff that Crowley says you're not supposed to do. It's not in that book. This isn't in his book. He says this. He doesn't say that. And at that point, the leaders came and they took all the Crowley books away.
And locked them up.
Locked them up and said, you can't argue with us.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, I see the same thing going on in this OTO. It's on a more subtle level. But rather than the sort of cult-like attitude of the Solar Lodge, they're not publishing Crowley material that they've got, because maybe they don't want us to read it and go, wait a minute, this is not what you're doing. And anyone who argues with the leaders gets in trouble. Either they don't get promoted, or if they're above a certain level, they get booted out.
Yeah.
So the effect is the same. And I kind of feel that the lack of books is a symptom of this distancing that's going on, where the leadership of the order is slowly pulling away from Crowley and from Thelema. And if you think I'm wrong about that, if anyone thinks I'm wrong about that, well, one of their own bishops admitted that this was happening. He said, yeah, this is a trend in the order. They're moving away.
Yeah.
So this intellectual migration, ideological migration, as I call it, away from Crowley and Thelema, is really, creates symptoms like the books going out of print, because the books are only going to go out of print if people aren't really interested in it. And they're not.
Right. And then they're compounded by the fact that they're so litigious and they've scared anybody who wants to do any kind of Crowley work. The books are disappearing. Yeah, but
look at how sad this is. The Blue Equinox, which the leaders claim is their model for the OTO, did come back into print recently.
That is correct.
So people can say, well, Keith, you're wrong about this, because obviously this book is back in print, which shows that there's an interest. However, the OTO, even though it claims that this book is the model it wants to use, had nothing to do with this new edition.
That is correct.
It was published by Weiser as a facsimile of a book that's in the public domain. And, as we've seen, the OTO promised a list of all the books that it claimed it had copyrights on, all the Crowley material it claimed it had copyrights on, and a list of everything it acknowledged as being in the public domain. That list has never appeared.
In response, they said it was too hard to create that list, and so that each and every person, if they want to publish something of Crowley's, has to ask.
Right.
I mean, that's a
again, you don't have to ask to publish a book that's in the public domain.
That is correct. But
and if someone tries to scare you out of publishing a book that's in the public domain, they could get into quite a bit of trouble.
Wow.
So it's very dicey to try to do that. But again, Weiser evidently saw that there was a market for this book, perhaps among OTO people who were interested and wanted a copy of it. We know people who bought it. They put the book out. The OTO had nothing to do with it.
And it's still a $40 paperback book.
How sad is that when the book that the OTO claims is so important to it has to be published without its direct supervision, no added notes, no introduction.
Mm-mm.
It's pathetic.
Yes.
And again, I can't help but see this as a symptom of an organization where most of the people are critical of Crowley, they're really not excited about Thelema, and the leaders are burned out by it. Maybe they produced great material 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but now they're just, it's not a priority for them anymore because they've seen how hard it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're halfway up the mountain. They don't want to go back down, but they can't move any further up.
Well, I think they also have some logistical problems. They've alienated New Falcon. They've alienated Weiser. They have their Thelema Media, but Thelema Media is not making any money. They have, some old stock of the New Falcon books that they purchased, but those are dwindling quickly. And the one book that they published, the Centennial Liber All, it wasn't that impressive, and it was over a year late. So they released their Centennial Liber All a year after the Centennial.
Right, but look, even the books that the OTO has published recently in Australia and in England, you were the person who designed those Liber out.
Well, that's correct. I'm the one who did those books for them, yes.
Right, so the high degrees in the OTO, the people who have book publishing experience, who are, supposedly these vast initiates, who lord it over us, with every opportunity. They could not be bothered to do this important thing, but the person that the OTO saw fit to boot out, in part because of your writing, that's the guy who gets to do these books? The level of insanity here, beggars belief.
Yes. It is kind of...
And I mean, to me, magically, what does this really say? If they're not invested in creating the most important book for the order, then obviously that indicates that they're moving away from it, that it's something that's uncomfortable for them. It's not what they're really interested in anymore. And this is what I think you can really look at in terms of the whole slide of the OTO into irrelevance and scandal and drug problems and all these other issues, is really the fact that the people in it aren't really that interested in it anymore. They're not really invested in it. If they were, they would want to see these books back in print, and they would be angry that they weren't. If they were, they would be demanding that the unpublished material be published so that they could study it and learn from it. And they're not.
Yeah. It is very disappointing, but hopefully that will change soon. Hopefully enough people will raise their voices, or maybe the OTO will take me up on my offer and work with me, and I certainly can get the books in print.
We keep hearing different stories. On the one hand, we hear that they want to do these hardcover library editions for university libraries. On the other hand, we hear that they're coming out. I heard a rumor that they wanted to do mass market paperbacks really cheaply, and that was going to be a project that was coming out soon.
I think there's a place for
about
both
this.
of those.
I want to see some results. I want to see a schedule and a timeline, and I want to see people being held accountable to it. And if they need the money, I want them to ask me for the money. Set up a web page where we can donate via PayPal.
Well, again, we'll see how it goes, but the money really isn't a problem. The books could be made available if they wanted them to.
Sure. No, I realize that. I just think we need to eliminate money as the issue, to clarify that and eliminate that, so that finally some of them will admit, we just really aren't that into it anymore.
I'm not going to hold my breath for that one.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. Well, thanks again for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, John. 93.
Thanks to Keith for being on the show. And now we move to the interview with Alfred. Alfred presented, as I said earlier, at a conference, a conference about esotericism in the summer of 2006. And during that time, he presented about using mass media like books or film or other ways of actually being magical sigils or talismans, or being magical rituals themselves, and how the viewers or the readers are participants in the rituals. And it really kind of struck me as a very fascinating concept. So Alfred and I discussed that, and we touch on Spare, and then we kind of touch on a number of other related subjects, technology, and the current state of people and how the occult communities are producing and what they're producing. So here's my interview with Alfred.
We have on the phone with us Alfred Vitale. Are you there, Alfred?
Yep.
93, welcome to the podcast.
93, hi.
Now, you're a doctoral student in human development at the University of Rochester, and this summer you gave a presentation about using, I guess, media as a ritual tool. And you use some examples of figures like Kenneth Anger, Grant Morrison, and so forth, kind of talking about the way that they use the media, film, print, graphic novels, etc., as like magical talismans. What kind of brought this to your attention and got you looking at this?
It began with, actually, I was taking a course in cultural studies. And one of the things I found interesting was that cultural studies often refers to occultism in particular, but it's almost always, as you'd expect, disparagingly, kind of, mockingly, et cetera, et cetera. But Kenneth Anger, as an example, this is where it began. Kenneth Anger is considered a very important filmmaker, and especially in cultural studies and visual and cultural studies, his work is considered pioneering in experimental film. And yet, every time I would read a reference to his work, whenever they discuss films like Invocation of My Demon Brother or Lucifer Rising, let's say, it would have that same mocking tone, and even biographies of Anger, except for one, basically positioned him as a sort of pioneering filmmaker who also has had this kooky, wacky, eccentric occult thing. It was always like at the sidelines of his work. And I would watch his work and say, this is not at the sidelines, it's the absolute forefront of his work. And parallel to that, I was reading, I finished reading The Invisibles, and Grant Morrison had said in a few interviews, and in fact in Anarchy for the Masses, the book, the Disinfo Guide to the Invisibles, he directly refers to the Invisibles as a sigil. I mean, directly. He says it many times in many interviews, and I started thinking about that. Like, what does he mean by that? So simultaneously, as I said, I'm studying the work of Anger, and I thought, Invocation of My Demon Brother, I saw it in a film class, or I showed it in a film class with a few students, and everyone thought, this is a film of a ritual, right? It's kind of crazy. But I argued that it's not a film of a ritual, that the film is the ritual. Mm-hmm. And from there, we kind of got into these arguments about, how can that be, et cetera. And then I had to give an explanation about magic, such. And so it got me thinking, is this something that people don't get, in the film scholars and such? Are they not getting this? And so that's how it kind of began. I started to look at, if a piece of paper can have a sigil on it in a graphic form, what's the difference between a graphic and a film or a song or any other piece of media? So that's how it began.
Well, let's talk about that film as ritual, because that it brings up kind of the theater of the cruel to me. Whereas instead of the person just watching it passively absorbing it, kind of from this distance, they're actually part of it.
Yep. So
expand on this film as ritual, and what is the part that the viewer plays in the ritual?
Yeah, well, there's two parts to that, I think. In general, if you just take any film, no matter what film it is you're, going to see flushed away, or even a cartoon, you go to a theater, so you consciously prepare yourself to enter a space that is dedicated to a particular act. When you get into the space, the lights dim, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone is focused on one thing. It's a collective sort of thing. And at some point in the film, you sort of become a collective mind focusing on this. And you're all, in many ways, in the same place, just like a group ritual would be anyway. And, the ritual has its things go on throughout the film that cue you to feel certain things, cue you to think of certain things. Then the film is done, and there's almost a banishing. The lights come up, it's like a bell rings. The lights come up, and then you get up and leave the theater, and you feel transformed. Mm-hmm. So, in a very literal way, the act of going to a film is a ritual. In this particular case, let's say with Anger, take something like Lucifer Rising, or actually, Invocation of My Demon Brother might be a better one. I'm looking for a quote that he actually said about that. But the film is something that's shown specifically in theaters that are a little more marginal. Mm-hmm. It'll never make the Cineplex. Okay. That means that already the audience is a sort of receptive group of people. They're going to see this film because Kenneth Anger is this important filmmaker, or there's a lot of different reasons, but Kenneth Anger is already positioned, in a sense, as a sort of orchestrator of this ritual. They go to see this. Now, Invocation of My Demon Brother, he said he wanted to invoke the Luciferian angels. He says there, I'm an artist working in light, and that's my whole interest, really. Lucifer is the light god, not the devil. The devil is always other people's gods. I'm showing actual ceremonies in the film. What is performed in front of the camera won't be a reenactment, and the purpose will be to make Lucifer rise. So, taking the idea of Lucifer and the rebellious angels, taking this, watching this film, he is basically trying to create rebellious angels. And even watching this film, which is replete with, very strong and graphic images of different things. It's a shocking film for many people, and a lot of his films are. So, he really is attempting to create in the film, in the viewer, rebellious angels. This is a sort of packaged meme in a sense, right? This is a way to stimulate people to be those rebellious angels. So it's not. So you're participating. As I said earlier, when you go to a film, you're already participating in the ritual of a film. In this particular instance, I think because Anger creates things with a magical intent, creates things with in a magical context, I think he's completely aware of your position as the viewer of this film. And so he is acting like the priest. In fact, Haller wrote that to screen this film and subsequent works is